All right, we're live. How you doing, man?
What's up, man? Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, appreciate it. When did we first get in touch? Maybe about a year ago? Well, yeah, I guess it was before your.
It was when I tried to sell you and you said no about a
What
year
I think?
ago.
Yeah, maybe this can be a live sales call that you can close me. You
Yeah,
can
it's fine,
close me
dude.
by the end.
Why'd you make the wrong decision?
All right. Yeah, it's been going good. It's focus on podcasting, social media, and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's really good that way. How's life been balancing the entrepreneurship and fatherhood, and how's life
Um,
changed?
look, it's been like, man, there's so many words that are coming to mind. It started off really, really confusing
Yeah,
because it's just like a whole new life. And, your business is built on top of your life. And so when your whole life changes, your whole business has to change too. And I don't necessarily think that I was ready for that, to be honest. I was really clinging to old stuff that served me when I was a single bachelor. And so I just had to let myself go through a season of really rewiring a lot. So that's why I immediately said yes to this podcast, is because I just feel like I'm really like coming out the other side of a lot of that. And there were some dark points for sure, and some light points as well. Yeah, so it's been a whole roller coaster, dude. But it's been
yeah, it's
beautiful.
awesome.
It's been beautiful. It's like the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, it was the same as anything, right? Anything we do new, it's like it's scary at first because we haven't done it, and then we get through it, and then
Yeah,
we're inspired to share it, right?
exactly, dude.
That's a cool
Exactly.
part. Yeah, it's every level is like a new birth, right? It's an initiation is to begin something new, to initiate something new, and it's like a new birth. And what's the quote? It's like you have to sacrifice your old life for your new life. So
Hmm.
when things are falling apart, they might have served us from that level, from like if we're going from level one to level two, the things that serve us at level one, they can still be good things, but they're not. Those same things aren't going to serve us at level two. It's going to take a different drive, different energy, and a different way of doing things to kind of recalibrate how things need to be done. For me, when my daughter was born, it just drove me into getting organized.
Yeah.
Right? It was you're organized for yourself, but then you have to be responsible for more people. You're like, okay, how do all these pieces fit into that bigger picture?
Yeah,
And
dude.
it's a stretch. It's like going to the gym, right? You have to stretch and tear down the muscle to grow. It's the same thing in life,
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
that
I completely
discomfort.
agree, dude. And it's also like, I actually grew up like in like the best possible conditions. I feel like my parents did an amazing job looking back. Like every kid has some angst when they're first moving out and they're a teenager or whatever. And I'm well aware of like how lucky I am that I have an amazing relationship with my parents. Very lucky. But like because of that, the thing that people don't talk about is when you have a kid, now there's all this pressure of like there's huge shoes to fill almost like this like I'm
Mm,
not gonna like be the guy that stops this like generational like blessing. So
yeah,
when I had a kid, I'll say I put so much pressure on myself that I almost like sabotaged like everything. Like
interesting.
I put so much pressure because I was like, if I'm not immediately available for anything that my wife needs at any time, I'm not a good dad. Like or like if I'm not like completely present in every moment with him, I'm not a good, like all these things. Because my dad just did such a good job, like such a good job. So it just made it almost like this. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people talk about that. That's a good point because
Yeah.
my life was a little different. It's Yeah, but it's also like setting a standard, right? And it's like, oh, this and that's I was talking to this with Keaton yesterday. It's like people's biggest fear is themselves is because they know their potential and they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to step up to that, right?
100%.
So it's the same thing. It's the same thing with our parents. It's like they set it, people need standards. And it's like they set the standards like, oh, yeah, I like that you said that, right? Because people think about like, oh, a lot of people say, oh, now I'm a parent, I got to heal all this trauma, and they get into their stories and stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
like,
And I have
you know,
trauma. Like, don't get me wrong. Every parent makes mistakes, but
yeah, of course. Yeah, that's another good point. Like, I didn't understand my parents until my daughter was born,
yes.
because sort of that stuff, those opinions, kind of that like emotion that we hold on to, it's like until you're in those shoes and you look back and you're like, oh, they were actually doing the best that they could. I get it now. Right. I
Yeah.
think I think a lot of that washes away because you have that experience. It's funny.
Well, and I think men become men when they no longer idolize their fathers as if they're like untouchable, but they kind of move into this perception of like, oh, he makes sense to me now. I see why he did that from a good or bad perspective. Like if you have a neglectful father and you didn't know your father, I don't know what your background is necessarily, but if you had that, I think that once you can start to um not justify, but like empathize with the behavior and understand it, then you're beginning the process of like coming into like being a man. And for me, also like seeing how my dad handled certain things in my family, some things that blew up and some crazy stuff that happened, and like I can like, it's no longer like, oh, he's just perfect. That's why, it's more like, no, he had a really hard decision that he had to make, and that was really weighty, and I'm sure and you start to understand, like you said, when you have a kid, starts to just change your perception a lot. And for me, what it's done is it's probably been the best thing that I've ever done for my overall like character growth and for my overall like self-awareness, is because now you're so aware of both what your father, for me, what my father did and how it affected me. And it gets you so keenly aware of how what you're going to do is going to affect your kid. And
Yeah.
that just gets you just reflecting on everything. Like, not, you can't do anything blindly anymore. It's a very expensive, caloric thing to not just have a kid who's like not sleeping or whatever, but also to start having all this self awareness popping up all of a sudden that you didn't have before. Of like,
Yeah, because it's like a bigger mirror. It's like all the things I'm doing, I got to be a lot more mindful because like what do I want to pass on to my kid as well,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
For me, it was the biggest catalyst for growth because we were talking about this before, but talking to bachelors or single guys in business, or even the guys that are older that still don't have solid relationships, that aren't committed and don't have children,
mm,
it's just night and day difference with like the understanding and how that plays into business and working with people. Like you said, like you had more compassion, understanding for your father,
yeah,
and all business is relationships. It's dealing with people, right? So if we don't have that same compassion for people, it's like we won't know how to properly lead those people to the result we're trying to get them. Because as you know, when you're coaching somebody, it's I always say it's like 10% systems, 90% the person. So if you don't understand how that person sort of flows and operates and how to gently guide them and still get them moving forward, a little love, tough love, then you're gonna struggle with that.
that's right.
And what's up? And your dad, so I believe he was in the online space before. Was he the one that got you into what you're doing now, in a way?
No, I didn't even really want anything to do with my dad's business. I didn't. I wanted to like totally be my own man kind of thing. So I started off. I kind of like, if you can imagine him being like a trunk. I started off as a totally different sprout, and then I kind of grew, and then I kind of like merged into it in my
Yeah,
own way. But yeah, I mean, he definitely inspired a lot of like the spiritual philosophies. But the way that we run things is so vastly different that, I mean, you could compare it. It'd be like comparing my business to somebody else's business in the online space. Like there's similarities, but like he's
because
never run a dime in paid ads. Has had the same two team members for 15 years, and he runs it very very differently. But yeah, he's an Amazon coach, and it's definitely a part of why I do what I do for sure. It's because I love. I grew up going to his conferences and saw like the impact that had on people, and I understand the power of putting people who have something really really good in a place of influence and helping them build that out. So 100%. But yeah, I think that it's a tricky line because obviously I have a coaching program and people like want to get my help. And if I'm like, oh yeah, it's 100% my dad, then people like want to work with him.
well, no,
So
I mean
be like,
you guys have
actually,
different offers as well, right? He's
it's
still, yeah, yeah. I've
it's
seen
just
that.
like honest, like, yeah, I learned a lot. Just the mindset stuff, you know what I mean? But even then, I've still spent 300 grand on masterminds and courses and stuff like that to learn my own things. But yeah, I started off as a wedding photographer and then got into the coaching space. I was already a year and a half into being a wedding photographer before I even knew like what my dad did and how it worked. Like he just never
Really?
did. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just
he was
didn't
just
understand it. I didn't
he was a
understand how to
spy.
get it. I had no idea. I didn't get it at all. Yeah.
That's funny. That's why my
Boss me
dad.
for some wedding photography and sold my own.
Yeah, my dad has no idea how I make money too. We were talking the other day. He's like, "How does somebody work with you?" Because I'll do the spiritual guidance and I'll do consulting and stuff at the same time. We're talking about like the online stuff. And he's like, "I have no idea how many people make money. They just say things and they make money." I'm like, "Yeah, that's how it
Yeah.
works now." But
Ridiculous.
with that part of that conversation we were talking about, you just said it. It's like highlighting people that are offering good, valuable things too. And I think that's the importance of social media is I look at social media overall as just a whole cesspool of crap because there's so much, most of it's just complete garbage, right?
Yeah.
But then there are the people like you and other people I've had on the podcast, I like to highlight of like, hey, these guys have a super, they're offering amazing value. They have a super integrity business and they're really helping people move forward. They're not just throwing out offers that say like, hey, just buy my thing, because there's plenty of that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I'm noticing a lot of that stuff, like the stuff that lacks integrity and true value, that stuff's falling apart. Those people have a ton of problems in their life right now.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
and I'm sort of predicting this next like 5 years is going to be like the people who really offer true value. Those people are really going to excel now.
Yeah. Well, I
So it's
mean,
like a
Warren Buffett says it best when he talks about the stock market. So he says the stock market in the short term is a voting machine, but in the long term, it's a weighing machine. And I think it's the same with our industry. The coaches or consultants or leaders that people get behind, at the end of the day, it's the character of the person and the value that they add to their products and services. In the short term, people are going to cast their votes with who they decide to buy from. But in the long term, it's people who have a lot of character and just continually add value that are going to stick around.
That's going to stick around. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
sort of it's the weeding out process. It's like those people just get wiped out. So
Yeah. So like when Warren Buffett's making an investing decision, he looks at the overall weight of the business and the asset class, and not just like, is the stock going up this year or not? Like 1 year time horizons is not how you build a $100 billion net worth. You build it by like buying stocks of companies that have weight, because over time the stock will go up. Even if just inflation keeps going, the stock's going to go up because the company has actual weight. It's the same with our industry. People seem to play by a totally different set of rules in this industry for whatever reason. They just throw out the classical business stuff. They think because it's the internet that the rules are different, and they're just not.
yeah,
That's what I think I got from my dad, by the way.
yeah.
I think it's
That's really good to highlight because, a lot of my mentors are, 30 plus years older than me. And that's why we can kind of weave those both worlds of like, hey, I'm online kind of doing new things. And then they have the older guys are just very good at the core principles and very consistent. So they've built their wealth over decades. But then they look at the young guys, they're kind of like doing all this quick and easy or whatever. That's why they don't understand, right? Because there's like the quick and easy. Oh, well, it's not quick and easy, but there's like the online guys that are doing really good business like you. Yeah. And so I always tell guys, I'm like, hey, you need older friends, you need older mentors to like weave those both worlds, because those guys will ground you and keep you more consistent. And like you said, it's funny because like how you do one thing is how you do everything. We're talking about when I was talking to Keaton yesterday, he was saying, when I work with a new client, I look at their marriage, right? Because that's a reflection of how they'll do everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like everything that's successful has to be a long-term commitment, not just a short term. If it's not, I can't do anything short term because I just know it's going to be short term gain, short term loss, and you're going to be stuck on this hamster wheel, right? Like marriage, I know a lot of people are scared. A lot of people are scared of commitment in general. And then when you bring up,
because you can't trust most people.
What's that?
They should be, because you can't trust most people. Like it is scary, So
Yeah.
like it's a leap of faith. Like people don't have that conversation. Like marriage is a leap of faith.
Yeah, but there are still,
but there's still a leap of faith.
of course, yeah. No matter how good you think it might be, there is. But then there's always like, you're always going to reach new areas of growth that are going to be sort of like when you said when you're a father, right? It's a new area, which is like, it's still an amazing thing, but it's just new. And that's what different evolutions of the marriage are going to look like as well, too. Where you're like, hey, we're both not the same people 10 years ago, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, and you're like two sprouts that are growing into one tree,
Yeah.
You become one being. And that's the biblical view of it, is you literally in a spiritual sense
Become one being.
One being. Yeah. So, being Christian, which is my belief system, it's like I literally believe that in the eyes of God, he sees us as one person, right? So it's like, and you can't separate that anymore, And so that's also why I don't personally, and I don't judge people who have. It's like the world's messy, but I don't believe in divorce. It's like if we're married, no matter what. Like if she freaking loses her legs in a freak accident, her face is mangled, she's in a wheelchair, and it's like she can't talk. It's like that's my responsibility. I gotta take care of her for the rest of my life, because that's the covenant that I made. It doesn't matter. The only time biblically where you can divorce your spouse as a man is if the woman is sexually promiscuous with another man. It's the only time. It's the only instance. Anything else is like, gotta stick by her no matter what.
Yeah, because I think everything else ultimately solvable, right? It's just,
Yeah.
if you're ever stuck in life, it's being stuck is a lack of not knowing, right? So it's like seek the greater light and expand and start knowing more and deepen that. and then you're able to move out of the thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I
And like
know.
about deepening and like getting better through the process. One of my favorite verses. I came across this verse yesterday, actually, going through a book called "Consider the Lilies," which is a biblical view on like anxiety and depression and stuff, because it kind of runs in my family. Really good book, and it was talking about the role of children in purifying your soul. And one of the verses that it referenced was Psalm 127. Towards the latter end of Psalm 127, it's a really, really cool verse. It says, "Children are like arrows in the quiver of a warrior, and blessed is the man who fills his quiver." Right? It's like, dude, and that's so sick. It's like the more arrows you have in your quiver, the more shots you can take, the more ammunition you have, the better offense you have for life. Like, and that's so counterintuitive to like, that's so counter to the way that people look at kids. Most people look at marriage and children as like kind of a liability until you get to a point where you understand what they actually mean. You know, and children are assets, not liabilities. They're assets. They're the longest term possible asset that you can invest into as children.
Yeah, but it's also, I always say, if you want to be successful, do everything opposite of what regular people do.
Yeah,
And so if people are scared of marriage and having kids, so yeah, probably get married and having kids,
exactly.
because you don't know. I didn't want to have kids until my daughter was born. I was like, oh, this is amazing, right? I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah, dude.
What was the thing? But yeah, that's another thing. We're talking about responsibility ultimately of a marriage, having children, and it's what does God do? God has children, right? We are children of God, and it's like, so we're the microcosm of the macrocosm. That's why when we study and become more God-like, then that's when we're more aligned, and that's when life becomes better.
That's right.
And
And
as
doing
a
the
parent, that's
things
the
natural.
what's that?
Doing the things that he calls it to becomes more natural as you understand them. You know,
Yeah, that's where our flow and alignment comes. Maybe we can talk about like the anxiety and the stress and all that. That's a buildup of living out of alignment.
yeah. I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff, I really say, unless you have like actual mental problems, like actual physical things or like an actual chemical imbalance or something like that, most of this stuff can be solved with different, more holistic ways, right? Movement, prayer, meditation, different energy work, right? It's something there that's giving you a message. It's like energy coming in that's saying, hey, do this thing that you don't want to step up to, you don't want to take the responsibility. So it just sits there and kind of pokes at you until you do it. But then
Yeah.
people say, oh, this is, you
And,
know,
and anxiety's rampant also because I think that we kind of live separated lives. Like, for example, like
okay.
pornography. Like, pornography is already bad because it ruins your sexual relationships, but one of the worst things that it does is it isolates you. You create a separate life, you know? You have a totally separate thing. And so when you believe that you have to hide something from the world or you have to make an adjustment later because of something that you like, if you have a drug that you do on the side or a bad habit or a vice, something that you do that you aren't addressed, like that's where most anxiety I think comes from is there's something in your life that you know isn't right and you know it's missing and you have to fix it and you're not fixing it, right? And the reason I bring up pornography is that's probably the most common thing for men that I've seen. But there's other things too. Like it can be like, for example, I think Jeff Bezos has a quote where he has this idea that anxiety isn't like you've got a lot of work you've got to do and you're overwhelmed in the work. Like I actually love having
Yeah.
a lot of work to do
It's
because
saying like, hey, this is what you're sort of like all this stuff, right? It's hey, this is your potential. You're not living up to it, and it's like it's coming to feed you, but you don't want to receive it to actually do something with it, right?
yeah, right. The anxiety comes from not consistently doing it.
Well,
Like
think about vices too. I like to make this stuff very practical. What is a vice? Like on a tool bench, right? A vice that's like on the corner of a tool bench. It's that thing that keeps things in place, keeps them stuck there and locked in, right? So when you have a vice, think about all the vices. If it's food, money, sex, whatever it is,
yeah,
it's keeping them stuck on that point where they don't want to grow up and mature, right? So anybody who has those severe vices, they're stuck. It could be 12-year-old them, it could be 8-year-old them, whatever it is. It's that point where they don't want to they don't want to keep growing, so it holds them there, and then they start filling it with the vices and filling it with a thing to sort of hijack the like the version of there's an authentic version that they crave, but this
uh-huh.
is like the hijacked version,
uh,
right? So if it's love, if it's joy, if it's connection, whatever it is with
yeah.
drinking or whatever it is.
That's classical wisdom in the church, how they put it is like all good things that God made, Satan turns into things that, like, that humans abuse. Basically, all things were made good, but then being in a fallen world, they're then used for evil, like sex or like money or like even like drugs. Or because even myself, I used like ketamine as a therapeutic mechanism. It's a psychedelic, and I'm a Christian. A lot of Christians, I tell, I used ketamine. They're like, ooh,
It's crazy.
yeah. I was like, dude, it helped so much. Like I was able to do so much good work when I was in that state. But I got what I needed, and I have no craving for it. And I don't even really want to try any more drugs
Yeah,
almost ever.
it's like the ultimate power is you, right? So I know a lot of people, they when they hear, oh, you're a spiritual guy, they assume like, oh, I don't take people in the mountains of Peru, or I don't promote any drugs, I don't promote anything, any drugs, alcohol, nothing. And they
Yeah,
say, well, you do psychedelics, right? I'm like, no, because the ultimate power is you. So it's like, you know, I've done, mushrooms and stuff in the past because I just didn't know, and that might have did something, but ultimately it wasn't until I reconnected to myself, reconnected to God and others. That's when I truly start moving forward, right? And everything you're saying, it's like when people are stuck, they're disconnected from themselves. Which, if you're disconnected from yourself, you're disconnected to God, which is your power source. So all these things, yeah, that's the all the things with, like you said, it's like everything was made good, but we live in a world of polarity, so everything has good and bad in it, right? So it's like food can be good to nourish us, but food can be bad if we eat too much of it.
yeah,
It's sex. Sex can be great. Sex creates, kids, and sex can also be abused, right? So I think the piece of that is, what are you using for? And is like, is the sacredness part of it or not part of it? Right? If sacredness is a part of it, then it can be used for good. If it's not a part of it and it's just used for pure pleasure and entertainment,
yeah, right. Well, it's directional and directionless behavior, essentially. It's how I boil it down. It's like, or is what you're doing being done with an end in mind that you're pursuing? Or is what you're doing just being done because in the now it just soothes the pain of existing? Like, existence itself is painful. Like, people don't, like, our culture almost wants to have this idea that, like, life is supposed to be easy, and if it's hard, then you're doing something wrong. And I think the sooner you get that out of your mind, the healthier you're gonna be. Like, life freaking sucks. So there's so many challenges and so many things come your way that you weren't ready for. And anybody who doesn't admit that they've had crazy challenges is, one of those guys in our industry that we're kind of dogging on earlier. Like, dude, things are challenging. There's challenges. So for me, it's like the way that I see vices, sexual vices, drug vices, alcohol vice, whatever it is, it's like the best solution to that is to get, you seem to be almost a very visual thinker in the way that you're thinking about it. Code is almost like aligning back with your creator and the calling on his life.
yeah, like a path, a pillar, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Right, dude. And I think once you get clear on an in and you get clear on who you are, then a lot of these vices stop having so much pull. I think when you said something interesting, you said disconnected from yourself. I think humans can live a lot of their life literally separate from their own self. Like their consciousness almost isn't even in their body. They're not living their life. They're just sort of coasting their life. They're not actually experiencing it. They're not even present for their life. And I've had seasons of that, and honestly, because I know this podcast is kind of about having kids and stuff. When I first found out we were pregnant and had a kid and what, I kind of got there because I had it in my head that I wasn't ready for a kid, which is so not true. I was more than ready, dude. I was born to be a dad. Like now that I'm here, it's the best thing
Yeah,
I've ever done.
you've already lived like 60 years within 25 years.
Dude, yeah, well, it's matured me about 6 decades for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's forced me to. And it's forced me to even burn certain things down that weren't supposed to be in my life and things that other people look at and thought were good things, but I knew because of the way that I was functioning behind the scenes that they didn't see that I needed to get rid of that thing. And so it just forced me to change so much and just genuinely just not care what anybody says or thinks about me. It's like my real life is my wife and my kid. That's my real life. Like I like even today I got up early, I got up at 5:30 today, hit the gym, got back, got all my work done, got everything done, so that now it's coming up on 11 a.m. now. I can spend the rest of the day with my kid and my wife because we're going to the children's museum. It's like that's my life, dude. And my business is just leverage. Like I want to 100% leverage. I don't want to have to. I want to use my brain and use leverage and make strong decisions to make my money. and not use willpower, because I want my willpower to be saved for my family as best as I can. And so that's kind of how I've processed business is what are the things that work the best, are the most flow like for me and the highest levers. For me, it's just like launching profitable funnels, creating new offers that I believe in that scale, working with great team and making content in a way that aligns with my routine and feels easy. And it's like those things make a couple $1,000,000 a year. It's pretty easy for me to do. If I can, not every day's like today where I'm cutting off at 11 and spending it with my family, but the fact that I can do that is like gold. And I've designed everything so that it can be that way. Whereas back before I had a kid, I could not do that. Especially in terms of my beliefs and what I prioritized. It was 12-hour days. It was nuts. It needs to get done right now, right now. Everything's right now. Nothing can wait. And I had this urgency that got a lot done, but at the sacrifice of my availability. And
Yeah.
so now my urgency is in specific hours. It's like it needs to get done in this time. Otherwise, it's not getting done till tomorrow. And that is a very new pattern for me. And that took a long time for that to develop because,
Well, what
yeah.
you're like, what I'm saying when you're talking, it's like progression, right? Because you said, so as you progress, things become more efficient and it's sort of, you have more leverage, right? It's easier to do the things that were kind of hard and tough before because we advance in understanding and kind of power.
Hmm.
And because going back to what you said, it's like, yeah, life sucks, but life shouldn't always suck, right? Eventually we should figure some things out because once we gain wisdom, we have more leverage in life.
But
So
yeah,
we can work in those shorter periods of time and be way, way more highly effective and get produce more.
yes.
And I think on the spiritual path, we have spiritual initiations that accelerate our growth. And in life, I sort of separate just for context. So like there's spiritual initiations and life initiations, right? Life initiation would be different phases of life, marriage, having kids. And if somebody doesn't have those initiations, it's almost like you're gaining, it's like gaining more superpowers from God. It's like, hey, you committed to this thing, you're married, you have kids, you have more responsibility in your life. Here's more,
Yeah.
right? And it's all, in your container, this is like little single us working 12 hours a day, really hard, whatever, producing, what's a single guy usually make 5-10 grand a month, maybe,
Yeah.
right? And now it's like, okay, hey, now you have a wife, now you have kids, now you have more kids, whatever. So it's almost like there's a switch flipped because I'm sure your business like grew even more once you had a kid, and you're like, wait, how did that? You're like, now I can do less, create more,
Hmm.
and you know what I mean? It's like it's not logical because it's such a leap, it's such a quantum leap in life.
It is
But
a
it's
quantum. Having a kid, it forces you to think in like a quantum sense. It's like it's not effort equals yield. It's being aware of the power that you have and how you wield it. Like that's what makes money. It's like leverage and just better decisions. That's really what I've realized my job is just to make good decisions from a place of abundance and a sense of security. And like for me, I don't, I think the ultimate source of abundance and getting into like a state of abundance. The new age people talk a lot about like detachment and relaxing your attachment and stuff like that. Now, here's what they're missing. You can artificially create that biologically through like mindfulness meditation. You can create that through vision boards and relaxing in new reality and all this stuff. But dude, for me, it's just Jesus. Like when I die, I know where I'm going. I know why I'm here. I know why I was made. I have total clarity. Everything, including my family, outside of my walk with Jesus and outside of my knowledge of God, is just there to teach me lessons so I know Him better. That's it.
yeah,
It's like
right.
everything. Everything boils down to basically that, and it just doesn't matter. And so the true detachment is like where you set your heart. And so for me, like once I had my kid, I realized my heart was set on progress, money, growth, status. It was set on be the best dad I can be, show up every single day, work hard, grit, make it happen. And then at some point it just stopped working, dude. I hit a wall and I burnt out so hard. It just didn't work. And I just had to
So you're
connect.
saying you're saying the old stuff that worked before your son was born. You said that the same stuff didn't work anymore. Yeah, right.
No, not at all. Yeah. And I had to like because wherever you set your heart, wherever you set your mind, you're linked into to those things. Like if I set my mind on like one of the things I was linked into was show up every single day no matter what. Work hard. Don't let my family down. That kind of energy, right? Which is ridiculous. Like I can make plenty of money. Like I need to relax. But at the time, I was so afraid of like letting my family down or not providing or whatever that like I got into the state of scarcity. My perception shrank down to what if, what if, what if, what if. When in reality, if I'd have just taken a second and just made sure that my walk with Jesus is right, my walk with God is there, all this would just pour out from that place because the truth is, none of it matters. And I made it matter so much in my head, like so much. And even the idea of like everything breaking and I lose everything and I lose my family and like it's like I still have peace because I have Jesus. And that's the true I think that's what the new age people are missing. Is that their sense of abundance is sourced in almost this idea of like, I'm eventually gonna die and I'm a material being and my spirit will live on somehow, etc. And or it's just in a I don't really care and sort of artificially trying to get yourself to not really care. For me
Yeah,
it's
it's a massive lack of responsibility. There's, when I say spiritual, people are like spiritual, they have this broad thing. And I'm like, I don't know what they're imagining in their head because spirituality has just been so ripped apart. You could look at religion, you could look at, it could be new age, like new age, I like title as like irresponsible,
Mhm.
sort of the, hey, I'm just going to flow and just enjoy life. And I can just kind of dick around and like, nothing's too serious. Right. And there is a responsibility, right? Because if we don't figure it out here, we still have to figure it out when we pass on, right? So it's like, it's sort of like now or never, right? So
Yeah.
it's like and when you look at life that way of like, hey, you got one shot to make it as good as you possibly can, and you know, after we move on, whether you believe in heaven, higher dimensions, whatever it is, we still have potential to grow and progress, right? We're limitless. Here, what we're experiencing is just like a limited physical body, right? As
Yep.
we as we move on, we still have to grow and progress. We don't just get to this like
Yep.
nirvana, we don't just get to this nirvanic state where we're just stagnant. That would be very weird,
Yep.
So
It would be. Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's like
the
oh,
new age can really hurt people because it lacks responsibility. It lacks without responsibility, you lack power. So you see people drift around and have all these problems, right? It's not until you connect to that power and take the responsibility to fulfill your purpose. That's where the abundance really comes in play.
yeah. I completely agree, dude. In this life is, people get really freaked out at the idea of like hell and heaven and stuff. Yeah, I'm even still having been a lifelong Christian, still learning about like what the Bible actually says of these things. There's so many disagreements within the church itself. Fundamentally, if you just believe Jesus is who he says he was, then you're a Christian. So these things are somewhat semantics, but um, our life can be seen almost as this like runway, and when you pass, you're taken off, and you're going in the direction that you set your soul in. You know, and and people don't think about it like that. This is a way that we can physically do business with our soul and with God while we're alive. When we pass that direction you set it in, that's where it's going. And if you don't believe that, if you believe that when you pass, it's just like nothing, which is just such a ridiculous
That's
concept.
sad.
It's sad that people
Yeah.
actually think that.
Well, actually, let me jump in. The people I see that do believe that, look at how they're living their life today. They're living their life the same
Either
way. They're like,
atheism or it's nihilism, right? Or it's there's just glass. They're
yeah,
not there, and they can contribute some good things to society. There's some good philosophies that have come out of that perception of the world. Almost, there's a lot of like self responsibility. Like I think Marcus Aurelius, in his book, he talks a lot about like um, meditations. He's like, oh yeah, like when I die, I'll find infinite peace in the nothing in the void, basically. It was either Marcus Aurelius or another one of those like philosophers that people always reference. But there's some good things that could come from that. But the scary thing is I just people living with this idea that they're just here by biological chance. Just how do you live like
that
that?
just blows my mind. All this stuff that's here, it's like all the intricate pieces. Like
Yeah.
you can go so deep. It's even like you were talking about religion. You can get so much deeper into religion and like into the story of Jesus and like deeper, deeper, deeper. There's always a deeper aspect of everything. So if you're just like, hey, all this stuff just like poof, it's just here and just like you're not here. I think those are the biggest questions. Like when somebody works with me, those are the biggest questions they're trying to understand. They're like, who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? What is all this? They're trying to make sense of it. And through that, I'm like, oh, you're really gonna, it's like, yeah, you might see this on your sales calls too. It's like the deeper the questions they have, the better results they end up getting because it's like they create more space, they create more desire to like launch from there. If they're coming in, for more self-serving, oh, I just want to make a couple bucks, this and that. Those people always, they only last a little bit and they fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the people that ask like, hey, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? How can I help other people? Those are like some of the biggest questions you can ask.
Yeah. Well, I think the size of somebody's questions that they're asking is reflective of the size of their um,
Awareness.
awareness. Yeah, that's a great word. It's a perfect word. Their awareness, their sense of awareness, their sense of self, and sense of the world around them. Small people ask small questions. Big people ask big questions.
Yeah.
John Maxwell's got that book. Leaders ask great questions. It's a great
Mm,
book. It's just like, you know, if you're asking small questions like, "What do I do today?" It's like you're living in what do you do today? You know.
yeah.
But if you're asking a question to yourself, because you're always kind of walking around asking yourself a question, aren't you? It's like, "What's this?" Or "How do I get this?" Or "What's the next step for me?" Or these sorts of just back of your head questions. And I think one of the best things that I've learned how to do with myself, it's like the ultimate mindset hack is like just being in charge of the narrative of questions that are coming up. It's like being aware of them because you can just kind of pacify that through content, through consuming a bunch of junk, through putting all kinds of random messages in your head and not really controlling that environment. Your mind's like a garden, and if you don't plant the seeds that you want in there, it's going to sprout random weeds and it's going to be crazy, and you're going to end up with all these questions and thoughts that aren't actually serving you and your life's a mess. Not because your life's a mess, because your brain's a mess. But for myself, filling my mind with messages of more significant value, and then that inspires better questions as I go throughout my day, like for example, when you just live, you're self-aware, you're aware that you exist, you're living in your body, you've accepted your circumstances, you're not in denial, you face the music, you're right there, you're living in yourself, and you're not separate from yourself like you were talking about earlier. And then you're just asking good questions. You're saying, maybe not, how do I stop feeling so bad right now and so frustrated with myself? It's like, go get drunk. That's how you stop feeling bad. You know, if the question becomes maybe, how do I make the most of this next 3 or 4 years? What should I focus on? That's a bigger question, you know. But people walk around with these small questions, and they wonder how to expand their mind. The way you do that is you ask bigger questions, you know. And
You
some
ask
of
bigger questions, but you actually expand by actually doing the thing, right? A lot of people get caught up in the ideas and they don't have the power to take action, right?
hmm
That's where coaches and different healings and things can come in to bridge that gap. But yeah, I see a lot of people, they might have these questions, but then there's a, oh, I can never do that, I can never do that, and they stay stuck, right?
Yep, right. You have to take the leap into the scary answer.
Yeah, it's the unknown. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you ask a question and you don't like the answer, that's where you live stuck. If you ask a big question, scary question, and you get an answer that scares you and you don't move, you're stuck there until you do something about it.
That's the same thing as like with coaching too, right? Because a lot of people, when they ask a question, what I've seen, they ask a question, they're expecting an answer that almost justifies where they are, where they're stuck. And when you give them a job, your job as a coach or a mentor or leader is not to give them the answer they want, that, but you have to give them the truthful answer that's going to serve them, right?
Yeah.
That's going to blow them out of their shit. That's going to help them move forward.
hmm
And a lot of people don't like hearing that stuff, right? Even the same thing, it's like they're getting answers from God. They're like, oh, I know I'm supposed to do that thing. And they have so much resistance to it. And they might put it off forever. But it's like until you actually do that thing and take that leap with faith, then you're like, oh, that was much easier than I thought it was going to be, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we can really be our own worst enemy through
Yeah.
this.
Well, I think the clients of mine who have gone to do the best, they don't just ask like what to do. They try and understand like really why, and they try and see the patterns of things. There's a pattern to things. Any business succeeds because it's following the same patterns of every other successful business. So you just got to learn how to see those patterns.
Yeah.
And it's like if you can see those patterns and you can learn to enact them into your own business, then you can make as much as you want to make, basically. Obviously, if you're willing to do the work to implement those patterns. But I've had students work with me, and like I have one guy who worked with me 2 years ago, and he reached back out and he's like, "Dude, I didn't tell you this, but I'm now doing like 400, 500 grand a month. Like, thank you so much. Like, I've gotten here." I had another student of mine, and there's a reason I'm bringing this up. It's not just a promo. I had another student of mine go on to do. He had his first $1 million month last year in November. Both of these students, I really remember. It wasn't just, "Hey, do you like this ad or should I do like this ad?" And I'll answer that question. But it was they were like when I recommend a book, they'd read it and they go all the way through it and they have a bunch of questions about it. And it was a real download of like the way of thinking about like this particular business model. You know what I mean? It wasn't just, you know, should I do a VSL or should I do a low ticket funnel, you know, or whatever. You know, it was like,
Yeah, because that's the surface level. They're
yeah,
asking like
yeah,
they're asking the why, the what, and the how, like the deeper
yeah,
stuff to get more out of it.
totally, dude. And I'm
Yeah,
not saying this to sound smarter than I actually am. I'm really genuinely not like that smart. It's just that if you could see patterns in things instead of looking for like the externals, if you could look for the roots, the trunk, the branches, instead
the
of just being like, how
principles.
do I get this fruit? You know, it's like, well, you need to plant a seed, and then it needs to have roots, and it needs to grow a trunk, and then it needs to have branches, and then it'll eventually bear fruit. It's like people are like, I want the fruit now. It's like, well, you know, it's not
So
going to happen.
yeah. But yeah, that's like the principles, right? That's why I love teaching the spiritual stuff.
Yeah,
There's a difference between like the new age and like actual responsible spiritual stuff, right? And the responsible spiritual teachings they empower the individual and they give them the power, right? And that was
yeah,
why I was always curious. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school for 12 years, but
yeah,
I was always, I think in life too, even in business, you always get the it's very easy to say what the what is. Okay, do this business, do this, do that, whatever. Like that's what it is. But not a lot of people are really good at showing you the how or the why. And the how and the why is those detailed little steps. It's those intricate step by step process to achieve the what. So people really like, I see a lot of people with just anything. They'll be like, okay, let's do it, just do it that way. Like or like you were saying, like going to use like kind of a business example. Okay, we'll do a VSL. But like, okay, but what are the little details? Because those little tiny tweaks get you amazing, like way bigger results,
yeah.
right? So if we don't know the bare bones, the foundation of what
Core,
it is,
yeah,
what's that?
core fundamentals.
Yeah, if we don't know those principles and core fundamentals, then a lot of it's guessing and a lot of it's confusion. And I this is from my experience. I see this with many people is like nobody has ever reached success just by guessing, right? It's like wandering around in a dark room, bumping into things like, well, I could grab this, I grab that. But you don't know how to put the pieces together. Then when the light turns on, or light of God,
Mhm.
whatever system we're talking about, then you get clarity. Then you can see the whole plan. Then you actually follow that plan, and you're like, now I'm actually progressing, moving forward every day, right?
100%, dude. Well,
Yeah,
think about the way that, you learned math as a kid, for example. You don't go to the teacher and it's like, hey, teacher, like, as like a 6-year-old kid, and you're like, hey, teacher, how do I, divide
get caught.
fractions? Show me how to divide a fraction. This guy right here is dividing fractions, and it looks really cool. Show me how. And then the teacher would have to slow you down and be like, well, do you even know how to count to 10? And you're like, I mean, I think I do.
Yeah,
It's
you
like,
need the
well,
pieces.
okay, what's 1 plus 1? It's like, well, what is it? Well, it's 2. So it's like you start with the basics, and then you can build from those basics. And so this is what I think a lot of business owners get wrong, is they ignore the basics and go right for the quote advanced, as if the advanced is what gets you there. It's not. The advanced is the final 5% that gets you a little slight edge. Basics. You could build basic offer, basic funnel, basic knowledge of sales, basic delivery, $1 million year company. And you see it over and over again in this industry. It's not that complex. Basic
Yeah,
organization, basic stuff, dude. You know
I
what I mean?
s-
It's nothing super advanced. You
yeah. If you
know?
talk to any of my friends that are any of my like super wealthy friends, half a billion to $1 billion plus, they'll tell you the exact same thing. It's like all in the basics, all in the fundamental pieces. They're like all this fancy stuff of like they look at guys doing like influencers and stuff like that. They're like all that fancy stuff that doesn't work, right? They're like I built massive industries off the basics and just doing it's just rinse and repeat consistently. And
Yep.
now it's like when you have that and you have that strong foundation of finances, then you can do you can buy the cars and the fun stuff and
Totally.
whatever. But it's like the foundation is always the boring stuff that people want to resist. In my very first podcast, this guy Ash, he he's a I think like breathwork coach and he used to be a pro bodybuilder and stuff. And that was a key thing we were talking about is because people don't want to do the basics. They always want to say like, hey, how can I, if it's like take the gym for example. Oh, I don't want to eat healthy and sleep and be consistent, work out hard. But like, what steroid can I take? What supplement? Whatever. It's like it doesn't matter, right? That's not gonna, a pro bodybuilder can tell you that too. It's like the steroids aren't the end all be all to what they are because they still
Yeah.
have to have the
What app
foundation.
should I use, or what tech should I wear, or what's the best gym clothing, or stuff
Yeah,
like
they're like trying to get like they're at level one. They're trying to get to level 100, and like there's no way. I see that with like the gym. I see it with business. I see it with the
yeah,
spiritual path too. The spiritual path. That's why people like think spiritual stuff's like, oh, ayahuasca and stuff.
yeah,
I like yell at people and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to Peru for ayahuasca." I'm like, "Do not do that. It's the worst thing you can do." Because just to be clear, ayahuasca is extremely unspiritual. It's just garbage. But they think it is, so they're trying to have this like close to God experience because they don't think they can do it themselves. So they get skyrocketed up to here. They have this bizarre experience, and they crash back down to earth, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, I saw whatever," and they can't make sense of it, and they can't put it. They can't bring clarity to it to make it repeatable, right? So that's why a lot of those people keep going back to those vices or that thing that they keep doing. And I was talking to somebody yesterday. Actually, they do it's around like YouTube and stuff, and we're talking about coaching. And I said, I think this is what you said already, is a lot of these coaches put in all this pizzazz and all this crazy stuff to make it look valuable. It's like the most valuable stuff is just the bare basics that work, that save you time, so you don't have to like do all these. That's such a waste of time. People throw all this garbage in there just to look different or whatever. It's like just find the guy that has like your stuff is really like straightforward. Like this is what you need. This is what works. You're going to save time and get amazing results. So you can go, so you can go to what are you saying, the museum or whatever with your kid,
yeah, dude.
right?
Yeah. And
That's
we've
like,
got probably 8 or 9 sales calls today for our other company. We do either 3,800 or 6,800. And so I'm probably gonna have a 10K day chilling at the museum with my kid. It's like
yeah,
it's not, but obviously I wouldn't be able to do that if it weren't for like mastering the basics and stuff. Like, but there's this, yeah. I don't know. I just think we live in a culture where fundamentally, I just think people are just always comparing themselves to other people and they're not proud of their own journey, if that makes sense. Like, you got to be making steps every day that make you proud. If you're starting at 3 and you're just trying to get to 4, that 3 to 4, you need to be as proud, if not way more proud, than the guy online who just went 3,000 to 4,000. Because it is truly just you versus you every single day. And if you can really just tap into that consciousness, almost that sense of just like, I'm just making progress. I'm just showing up. I'm just trying
that's
to
the
do it.
best part,
Yeah, it's the best part, and
right?
it's most fulfilling, and you learn the most, and you actually get results. But I think most people are walking around without even realizing it. They're not even running their own life anymore. They're just trying to catch up to what they see because they feel bad about themselves. That's probably the biggest, most undiagnosed problem is like, as much as we diagnose like anxiety and we diagnose like depression, we should diagnose comparison disorder. Like we really should. People just walk around. They're not even living their own life. They're just trying to catch up because
Disconnection.
they think they suck because they see all this stuff online.
Well, they might. I mean, they might have to be realistic with themselves. Like, hey, am I making the wrong choices? Do I need to do better? Right?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, sure, but compared to what? Compared to others,
Yeah,
that's dangerous.
yeah,
It's
it's
not
true.
you versus where others are at. It's I'm gonna get better, and there's no end in sight to that. Like it's a tree doesn't stop growing. If the environment's there, it's gonna keep growing. Like if that's sun, soil, water, tree keeps growing. There's trees that they're like 8 feet around, and they've been around for like 600 years or whatever. They just keep growing because the environment's there. And so the job is to build an environment where you just keep growing. You keep going. There's no end. It's just you just keep growing.
Yeah, I think joy is having like those tough days where you overcome your challenges. Like that's where I've achieved the most joy. Is my joy is overcoming challenges. So I actually look for challenge and say, cool, like that's just another opportunity to grow even bigger than that challenge every time. Right?
Totally. Yeah, I
So it's
completely agree.
yeah.
I'm gonna shut my door. My baby's.
And what is most of the guys you work with, are they younger guys? Are they fathers already? Are they is it
It's a
just kind
wide
of
spectrum. I mean, we have people in our programs who are in their 60s. I've got people I've got guys who are 17. You know, so
yeah?
like, yeah, it's mostly men, just because I am a man. But obviously, I work with women too. But I'll be honest, I'm not as good with coaching the feminine because as I just was raised very masculine. My dad sat us down and taught us lessons the hard way and kind of stuff. And so for me, I've always had trouble coaching more feminine people, in particular women. But there are certain women who, can kind of pick up on my more, you know, this is just kind of how it is kind of energy, and they
More
do very.
direct.
But yeah, I'm not a very empathetic person. Just and it's not because I don't love or
You
care
could,
about it. It's not very empathetic.
yeah, it's just sort of the field. Like business is generally more of a masculine field, and the directness does serve, right? Because I see a lot of people that are stuck. They need somebody to kind of like give them a kick in the ass to like
Yeah,
push them, or like they need like the truth can feel severe as well too. But like
yeah,
as a guy, you need to be able to share that with your people to really move them forward. So yeah, I understand. Like I would say maybe 20% of the people I work with are women,
yeah.
just because I come off a little bit more severe. It's not like I can't work with the women, but it's just it could
Well, and I
be
also just I would encourage women, like, go find a woman who's doing it, because I do honestly think that this is such a different life experience. Like,
yeah.
it just is. Like, our culture hates that idea for some reason, but it's like men and women live very different lives in our world. Like, they just do. So I'm almost like, if you can find a woman version of me, and you're a woman, you want to coach, like, go with them, because
Yeah.
they have your life experience, and they can speak to that in a way that I'm not capable of.
Yeah, I've never been in those shoes either.
Honestly.
So
Yeah, honestly, but that's not to say, like, I had one. She's a really cool person. I really loved watching her navigate the program. She went from like 4 grand a month to she had 50 grand a month, like her second month. She's like an anxiety healing coach. She's such a cool person, and I loved working with her. And yeah, unfortunately, and it could just be, I don't know what it is. Unfortunately, she's the exception and not the rule. There's just not a lot of women that I tend to attract, and it's not because I don't want to. I
I mean,
just don't.
yeah, I mean, it's still valuable. I mean, a lot of my spiritual teachers, I have a ton of women I would, train with, but
Yeah.
it's just different aspects. And I see when we look at like the spiritual stuff and energy, we have like masculine and feminine energy, and men have, hermetically, it's men are 70% masculine, 30% feminine, vice versa for
Mhm.
women. So it's not that men have to be feminine, but men also have to develop those feminine aspects. Like as a father, we have more balanced energy because we have to develop sort of feminine aspects to be more compassionate and open and stuff with our children. So we're not just complete,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've definitely
severity all the
attracted
time.
more women now that I've been married and had a kid.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was like 90% men, probably 95% men. Now it's like 80%, maybe 70%. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
see,
So
so
I've gotten
it's almost like that 70-30 I was talking about. It's like it's almost like coming into that
it's
balance
about there,
there.
right? It's about there. But yeah, so that's actually really interesting to point that out. But I think it's honestly, my energy has definitely shifted.
Yeah,
I
and
think
your energy is going to attract those opportunities and relationships and everything. But think about like communication is more of a feminine aspect, right? So think about sales, right? Sales, you need to weave both of those energies. You have to, because most super masculine guys, they don't know how to communicate. They just know how to like put their head down and work, right? So you have to be effective at sales and relationships, and to be able to build that trust, because that's a feminine aspect too. To be able to receive, you have to be able to trust,
yeah.
right? So if a guy is just hyper masculine, he's going to be like, he's not going to go too far, right?
No, he's not. And I also think that a lot of hyper masculine men, meaning they've never like the idea that emotions are bad. Let's just start with that. It's like that's a very common thing for like hyper masculine men. I disagree. It's not emotions are bad. It's lack of self control is bad. Emotions are great. Self control.
Well, I've been talking about that a lot too. I separate the two. I separate feelings and emotions, right? So feelings like states of being. It's like when you're holding your son, you have joy, right? You just feel it's a knowing. It's a clear knowingness, right? And
Yeah.
then emotion, it could be like, oh, somebody cut me off in traffic, or I got this bill, or there's an argument. It's that distorted individual perspective that can come out in really weird ways, right? So it's like we should be able to like slay our emotions, and if we need to express them safely without damaging other people. But
Yeah.
it's like where I see guys get stuck with kind of the narrative right now is, oh, guys need to tune into their feminine side, be more emotional or whatever. It's like, no, guys don't need to be more emotional, but the feeling is like the inner knowledge. It's more of the subtle world to build the intuition and guidance, right? Whether you're receiving messages from God, or maybe sort of how to navigate like a sales call, or navigate client relationships, or whatever it is. It's more of that. And I think that's what women are amazing at that, because women feel like everything. And if
Mhm.
guys take a little bit of that and are able to tune into their more sensory based feedback, then
Yeah.
they.
Well, and I think the general advice, like the general societal advice from women to men about like just like feel your emotions more, it's
Yeah.
actually very dangerous advice. I would
Yeah, that's what I
say,
was saying.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
yep, right. It's very dangerous advice. because men's emotions are very different than women's emotions. And if men just let their emotions rip, like somebody's gonna get shot or killed, dude. Like, like you know what I mean? Like that's not good advice. It's more be more aware of your emotions
Yeah.
and work with them, not just let them fly. Because like even me, dude, and I'm like I consider myself a pretty self controlled, pretty self aware guy. I will have feelings or thoughts. I'm like that is a
Yeah.
dangerous feeling. That I do not like that thought just came into my head. And so I think the reason why women so like aboundingly, especially if they're just the general societal, you know, sort of a woman, your average person in our culture, they're like, oh, men need to feel their emotions more. I think it's because I don't think that women's emotions tend towards like the dangerous and like scary,
It's
you know?
good. Women play with women play they play with their emotions, guys act on their emotions, right? So if a guy's pissed, he's gonna do something bad.
Yeah,
If a woman is upset, she's just kind of playing in the feeling and stuff. It's not it's she's on the like spiritually women are sit higher, right? That's when women can see women are these what do you call them? My mind's going blank, but women have a more broad vision. That's why they're saying like, oh, what about this? What about that? And they give it to the guy, and the guy's like, that's too much for me, right? Because guys are like focused on one thing at one time, and yeah, women can kind of play in the imagination, the ideas of like, yeah, I'm upset, but oh, I'm thinking about this, I'm happy, I'm this and that. Guys like. If somebody's like pissing them off, they're gonna be like, "I'm angry. I'm gonna attack. I'm gonna whatever." Like they're gonna do it,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it has to be channeled like, maybe the guy does jujitsu or maybe the guy does something to displace that energy, but it doesn't, he's not sitting there crying for like 5 hours. He's not
yeah.
arguing with somebody. He's not, in those moments, maybe angry and you're in front of your family. In those moments, he's able to like just put it to the side. And then at the proper time, maybe, let go of it somewhere.
Solid.
Right.
And I agree, dude. And I think that as like my relationship with my emotions has obviously developed a lot since getting married. And one of the key ways that it has is she's definitely given me like like space to like more openly feel them, which is great. And I've never really had that because for the most part I've always just kind of dealt with them myself in my own way, and that's been very very helpful. But it's almost like it's still dangerous. Like you need to like, dude, like men were
That's why you need men to just say, hey, get over your shit.
yeah, we start wars, bro. Like we kill people. Like men, like we biologically we're so wired for like
Aggression.
bad stuff, like, but also beautiful, good stuff too. It's just I just don't think that women's dark side goes as deep on average as men's do. You know what I mean? Like we're ready to kill, dude. And so it's like I think that now that I've been married, I've had a place where I can process some of this and work with it because before getting married, I mean, it was mostly like just friends and other men, but I wasn't very emotionally available to random women because I'm like, you're not my wife. Like, I'm not going to give you that part of me. You know what I mean? It's almost like with that part of me comes like the sexual part of me as well. I'm not going to make that connection until I know that that's there.
I was talking about that to somebody yesterday or 2 days ago. He came to me and he'll probably listen to this podcast, but he was saying like, dude, like, he's hiring all these coaches, trying to help him with women and stuff. I'm like, you don't need any of that stuff, right? I'm like, you're a cool dude, you have a successful business, you have all these things. And, but he's like, oh, I look at the comparison issue. He's like, I'm looking at everybody else and like they have all these women and this and that, whatever. And I'm like, and he's like, I don't connect with women. Like I don't go after women until I feel like there's an actual genuine connection. I'm like, that's good. That's like better than, if you want to do something the right way, do it opposite of most people. And I'm
Hmm.
like, that's how it should be. So you're not distracted and chasing women all the time. And then when you find that one, you can actually invest in her.
Yeah,
Right.
totally,
And I
totally.
think that's actually, we're up in a little bit, but that's one of the questions I was going to ask you because I think it'll serve a lot of people is what advice would you give somebody that is, you know, maybe single and dating or has the intention of finding a wife, right? Because there's a lot of that's a big distraction for guys, right? And you seem like you hit the nail on the head pretty good and found the right woman, and you know,
Yeah, I mean, just be in the right circles, right? Um, I mean, I could go really, really deep into that, but the simple question is be in the right. Their simple answer is be in the right circles.
go a little bit deep. Let's get some
That
good
could go,
nuggets.
I guess. I
Yeah,
mean, well, what do you even want to get a girlfriend or a wife married for? Like, what do you actually want that for? Like, if you put aside a sexual relationship, what do you actually want that for? And you got to get clear on that because you can end up in a relationship that you really shouldn't be in because you never learned how to control your, sexual um,
Desires.
nature as a man, and you just end up with anybody, or you end up in a marriage you're not happy. A lot of the reason why men are passive in marriages is because they couldn't control their sex early on in life. They got married to a chick that they just settled for because then they could have guilt-free sex. It's a lot of passive men in marriages. That's what happens. So I would say if you can't get control of that, get some counsel, get some men in your life who can help you process it in a very open environment and figure that thing out. And then, which is really difficult to do when you're like freaking 17. Don't get me wrong, but you need to at least have the self control to not just like act. Like you're gonna end up in a terrible relationship.
Yeah, I
And
think
then
it's
get
starting with like people who inspire you, right? If they look at you and they look at your business and relationships, it's like, okay, what is it about Trey what are those pieces? Maybe not the whole thing, but like, what are those pieces that inspire me? And like, hey, maybe they need to reach out to you and they need to join your program, or because I'm sure.
like I don't pay anything. I mean, I charged one guy for like premarital counseling basically, and
Yeah,
I was like, I'm not gonna charge for this.
right.
Like I'm gonna do like if anybody ever wants me to help out, like I'm happy to help out. And I've had so many. I won't even name names, like people who are big enough in this industry where like I don't want to like hurt their image or anything, but they're reaching out to me and being like, dude, like I cannot. I'm I want to get engaged. I'm so afraid of it, or I'm engaged to be married and I'm so freaking out, or we just got married. I can't figure this out. So it's like it's more like a ministry thing for me to get to do that for people.
But that's
So
good though. I mean, that's why we're talking about disconnection this whole time. It's a lot of people are struggling. I tell everybody at the end of these classes that I teach, I'm like, if you need help, reach out, because the worst thing you can do is isolate.
yeah,
So it's like, it's not, a lot of some guys are like, oh, I'm embarrassed to ask for help. I'm like, there's nothing weak. Uh, Asking for help is a strength. It's not a weakness, right?
yeah,
It's saying, hey, I believe Trey has that thing, desire. How can I actually have that? And you're like, hey, like, I'm more than happy, right? Like, fills me up when people ask me these questions. I'm more than happy to answer questions to help, because I know that's going to bring them forward and that's going to bring more joy and fulfillment to their lives,
for sure,
right? I wish more people would reach out and like ask for help.
yeah. But so your question about giving advice to people who are trying to find it, it's really just try and control your sexual urges as much as you can. It's pretty much impossible to 100%, but like don't be just so loose with it. And then get in the right circles and then know what you're looking for. Like I was lucky enough to date some really awesome women. Wouldn't marry them, but I figured out like what I like and what I'm looking for in terms of character traits and sort of how they hold themselves and everything. And I'm really blessed to have dated the women that I dated. They were wonderful people and great women. And so I learned like, okay, I like this thing, I don't like this thing. So another thing is don't be so afraid of rejection. Like why don't tying your value up in whether a woman likes you or not, let's be honest, it's ridiculous. Like you need to have more going than like whether a woman likes you or not, and go figure yourself out and go build something so that if a woman says no, you're like, all right, well, just talk to more women, like. And
Yes.
so I kind of had that attitude. Like when I first finally came around to that, that's when I finally started like meeting great women and just having casual relationships. And then that's when I met my wife, and so, and I knew that I wanted to marry her pretty much within a day of meeting her. Like, not even gonna lie. Like, I was like, yep, this is it. Cause like,
I was going to ask you that.
yeah, I had in my head like this, I didn't really necessarily have how they looked. I think men get really hung up on how they look, to be honest. I think we're in a very narcissistic,
Superficial.
very superficial. And I got blessed that she's really pretty. I think she's really pretty. But I honestly think that if you're out for looks, then you'll overlook character, and character is what's going to give you the ability to navigate really, really difficult seasons and times.
Yeah.
And I've also found that the most high character women tend to be the most beautiful. There's something going on there. I really do.
Just
I
a
do.
different glow. Yeah. It's weird. You don't, yeah. The thing is too, it's like, if you're searching for women, like, you're not going to really find those women just kind of walking around out in public.
No.
All right. It just,
Yeah. Approaching women on the street kind of thing. No.
yeah.
Like that's where I'm lucky that I'm Christian and I'm dug into church and those communities. It's like there's an abundance of wonderful, beautiful women and but like don't become a Christian for that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I never. I just was raised in that environment where there's just so many amazing people in general, and in that bucket of people is women. And so that's I just was raised in that.
Yeah, I
So
tell people all the time, like there's amazing men and amazing women because people, social media bashes men and women all the time. But I'm
yeah,
like, I don't know, all the women that are in my life are amazing, right? It's
yeah,
just the one I'll choose to marry is the one I just feel most aligned with and kind of that knowing connection. And
yeah,
I think overall that's one of the most important pieces for me, at least, is like the spiritual alignment to understand progression and where we're going and like the
yeah,
higher aspirations of life beyond just kind of beyond just the base level of the relationship, just taking care
yeah.
of.
Well, and another piece of advice that I would give to men looking for a wife is understand that like who she is now is well, back up a little bit. First, make sure she has a good relationship with her dad. That's really, really
I
important.
say that too, yeah.
Yeah, that's super, super important. And because if she doesn't, that's gonna pull into your relationship inevitably every single time.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to change that.
And that's nothing can change that, and you can't change that, and it's sad, but it is what it is. And there's plenty of men that can work with that, but for myself, I didn't want to. And so the second advice that's downstream from that is understand that who she is now is large in part because of who her father was. But once you're married, who she becomes is large in part because of who you are. And so you have to understand like your job as a man is it's really primarily just to just be trimming the hedges of your soul constantly. Like selfishness and deceit and lust and like your number one job is to steward your soul and to walk closely with your heavenly father and to know who you are outside of your wife and to get and to inspire her with it. You know, like I've had now that said, I've had moments and seasons where I'm at my lowest and she's stuck. I mean, I'm low for like a while. It's hard for me to come back, and she's stuck, and that's because she's honestly because she's seen who I am when I'm at my best. If who I am when I'm at my best wasn't inspiring to her, she probably wouldn't have stuck, and I probably wouldn't have blamed her. So what you have to do is you have to work on yourself so that when you're at your best, you are inspiring and you are a driving force for her and you're welcoming to her and she feels safe with you so that she can become the best version of herself as you do life together. So understanding that your job is to not necessarily just marry any girl you can get. Like I won't say who, but someone who's very close to me. That's the best way I could put it without damaging them. Married whoever they get, and
Yeah,
now kids coming, and it just is like, dude, they're
you're kind of
not
stuck.
figuring it out. It's like
What about the opposite side of that too? Because a woman, were you nervous when you first met your wife?
no,
You weren't,
no, not really.
or were you
I was
more
excited.
maybe not nervous, maybe excited is a better word, but like inspired when you met your wife to do better, step up to the next level, or maybe
No,
just
I mean, but
no?
not necessarily. No, that's more an inner pressure that I put on myself. She's never expected anything. She just trusts me. You know. Yeah, she's like, I mean, obviously, if I she just trusts me. Like I've earned her trust. I don't need her to push me. The world pushes me enough. Like if she pushes me,
No, no, not like pushing, like inspires, like it's a more loving inspiration, not like a masculine, yeah, like a fulfillment of like, hey, her kind of peace and love fills me up too, so I can
yeah,
go and
yeah, yeah. No, I
become
would
more.
definitely say that she motivates. I would say more just our family unit motivates me than maybe just her as an individual, to be honest. Because I think I'm motivated. No, it's a complex question for me. I'm motivated by the idea of what our life can look like together if I'm my best.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's the idea of serving your wife, serving your family, and
yeah,
serving your wife, serving your family, and serving others.
yeah.
Right.
But it's less of a like motivated because I feel like I need to prove something to her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's more of like a pure kind of like inspiration.
Yeah.
Think of a
Yeah,
very pure version of that.
it's like the same thing that I get when I'm with my kid. Like when I'm holding my son, that's pure. Nothing can taint it. It's completely pure. It's
Yeah.
something that my wife and I made. It's a mirror of us. It's beautiful. And it's like nothing in the world can take that from me. You know what I mean? Other than me passing away or something. So it's like it's there and it's there forever and it's pure, and because it's never going away, that gives me a sense of like detachment, peace, abundance, and security with my work almost. So in that way, it's also drives me. Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it's never going away, right? So the real genuine stuff is the eternal stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's not the physical stuff. It's the not all this junk. It's the stuff that's still going to be with us once we pass.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Well, and on that note too, biblically, words are spiritual, meaning that
Yeah.
they never pass, right? So people don't die,
Well,
like
how
in
did
a spiritual sense. Their
think?
words are even here with us for forever until we stop talking about them.
Yeah,
You know?
I got better at business when I focused more on my words too, because like going back to God, right? We're studying God. How does God create, right? And the Bible says God spoke,
Yep.
right? Right. So it's like the words we say, and I took a lot of this from you've probably seen Myron Golden as well, right?
Yeah.
I love his stuff. He teachings from King Solomon and applies those to business,
Yep.
and he also inspired me to start making more content too, because that's sort of Solomon's thing. He published like 300 pieces of content or 3,000 pieces of content or something crazy,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I can,
No wonder he was one of the richest people to ever live, man.
yeah, right. He shared wisdom, but where was I going with that? Oh, the words. Yeah, it's like what you say, what you write, that has a ton of power. That has communication is the highest leverage you can have.
Hmm.
Because think of somebody who's older that doesn't have the physicality to go like grind and work hard. It's like they're using their wisdom, their imagination, and their words, and that has
Yeah.
way like if that's of value, it has way more leverage than all this other stuff.
Yeah. No, for sure, man. Yeah, words have leverage behind them if you use them properly. But just like if you're taking leverage out of stock and you take a loan, if the stock goes down, you're screwed. Words,
Yeah,
if you use your
yeah,
words wrong, you're screwed. If you
yeah.
use them right, you can build empires with your words. And I've been loose with my lips before and lost things that I'd worked years to have, and I've been intentional with every single word that comes out for years on end and built things. And so yeah, I totally agree. One of the cool things about that too is so bit of context to make the point. The Old Testament was primarily originally written in Hebrew, and I'm not even Jewish. I'm Christian. I have no relationship to Jewish people necessarily, other than just like a respect. But like this is a tattoo I have. It's in Hebrew. It's my only tattoo, right? And the reason why I have Hebrew on me, I mean, those are 4 words. It's a whole other different point. But the language of Hebrew, built into the language, is dual meaning for certain words to help you to give clues into like how the universe works. Basically, it's really sick.
Well, this is
So
energy. The universe is energy, so the Hebrew letters had a lot of energy in them. Right.
yeah,
That's what, and sort of since we've kind of gone away from that, we've lost a lot of the energy and power behind things. We kind of the symbolism in the words.
right.
There's been a disconnect.
So the point that I was making is when you use words, the word for words or language in Hebrew is the same word for the word bee, like honeybee, right? And so with every word, when there's a dual meaning, it's like a hint on how the world works.
Yeah.
And so language, like bees, you can create stings and damage relationships, push people away, etc. Or what's cool is on the inverse, you can create honey, and that sounds cool and all, but when you think about it, honey is the only physical food that doesn't expire. So if you put honey on a shelf and you come back to it 300 years later, even if you left the lid off, it's going to be pretty much good. You have to stir it a little bit, get it back to where it was,
Yeah.
probably crystallized quite a bit, but it's still edible. And so your words are it's the only positive thing that you can build that lasts forever. When you start to see words as a spiritual resource, not a physical resource. It's also why swearing, like that's why Christians have this thing about swearing. I swear a little bit, probably shouldn't, but I'm aware when I do it. It's not a habit; it's something I do intentionally. And that's because if I'm loose with my lips, then I inevitably end up using them in a way that damages my empire and damages what I've been called to. So just literally just by not swearing, you're practicing control. You're
Hmm.
practicing being intentional with this thing.
Be more
And
mindful
that's
of
how
that.
you end up building great things with it. By
Yeah.
inspiring your team or working with your clients and doing business, sales and content and whatever it is that you do, no matter what industry you're in, what vertical you're with your family, the way you interact with your wife, your kids, it's all words. It's
Yeah.
all
It can be a sword to build or destroy.
mm-hmm.
I like
Yeah.
how it's cool. I like how most of this podcast wasn't business because it's never really about business, right? As I was saying before, like business is 10% of the stuff and like 90% of the person, right? Who
Yeah.
that person is. And that's what I hope anybody watching has seen this over the last hour or so of like, it's all about becoming an individual. It's all about our progression, our connection with God. becoming who we're truly supposed to be, and then everything else, the money, the relationships, it's all a reflection of that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, I like how we highlighted the key points, like why communication is so powerful, why all these things mean so much. Just don't blow them off. And
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, you can end up deep just for the sake of deep, but when you really understand how the world works, it's like then you can move with so much more power. You know, you're not having to use force. You can use power, as the common saying goes.
yeah, it's but that power comes from, like we keep saying, it's like connecting to the power, right?
Hmm.
Stop being resistant to the power, seek it out, find it, connect to it, use it properly,
Yep.
and then, enjoy life. And then, yeah, life will be more challenging, but it becomes those, you find joy in the challenges, you find fulfillment, and like it builds you. That's ultimately what all this is to become spiritually stronger.
Yeah. 100%, dude.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole point. Like the whole point for me is to know God better. And God made everything. Like the whole universe, all the laws that make it up, everything. So by knowing God better, I gain wisdom. By gaining wisdom, I gain the ability to make better decisions, more power, and I become a better light into the lives of others. And I can build better things, do better things. People seem to be pretty lost in their direction and what it all means, and I would invite them to explore that as a potential vector for their life to steam through. It's the
Yeah.
best one. Consistently, the people that I look up to the most and succeed the most, they're on pretty much that vector. So
Yes, for me, when I was in my early 20s, when I was like, well, who has what I have? It was the people who are very spiritually aligned. Not that, like, maybe they were religious, maybe they were spiritual, whatever it was, but they had that guidance, right? They had a plan for their spiritual growth, just as they did for their business, they did for their spirit and their soul, right? So
yep,
you can't just have one without the other. You have to weave both of those worlds. You have
100%.
to weave the physical and the spiritual worlds together, because ultimately it's all a spiritual world.
Hmm.
But how to take that higher wisdom and apply it here so we can experience heaven on earth, and lead people out of suffering and more joy, and just ultimately more fulfillment. Cool, man.
100%. Well,
Yeah, we
cool.
went
Good.
went a little over, but I appreciate the extra time, and I think we got
Yeah,
some good stuff. So
yeah,
thank you again.
yeah. No, no doubt, dude. Thanks for the invite.